The coronavirus outbreak means millions of workers around the world are now working from home. Although video conferencing tech allows us joining meetings virtually, but many still find less effective compared to working in the office. How can we overcome this obstacle? Hi, my name is Sylvia. I'm the president of NAWMBASeattle. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, the most effective communication strategies for virtual workplace with Tami Lyon. It is my great pleasure to have Tami as our presenter because today you will learn the power of positive communication, especially in the virtual environment when our ability to decode messages is challenged. Say no more, let's get started, and please welcome Tami!
Hello and welcome to NAWMBASeattle's Professional Development Series. My name is Tami Lyon and I will be your presenter today. I might as well start by telling you right off the top a little secret. I am a communication geek. That's right, I love all things communication. I didn't start out that way. No, when I was little, I was completely obsessed with 1970s roller derby. I would spend the better part of every weekend glued to the TV. If you're unaware of the amazingness of roller derby, it's kind of like WWE on wheels. It's a full contact sport. It's played on quad roller skates on a banked track. There's 5 players on each team, one player of which is the scorer. They're called the jammer. The other 4 players on each team block, and points are scored each time the jammer is able to lap the other team on the track. I distinctly remember laying on my belly, chin in my hands, just watching and enamored at the strength and the daring of these amazingly strong women, and sure that when I grew up, I was going to be a queen of the roller derby. When the show was over, I would get my parents and I would immediately have them help me tie my skates, and I would go out to start my training, skating hot laps around the neighborhood. I might have been only 4 years old, but I was serious even then about my training. Until one fateful day when everything changed. I had to be about 5 because I remember I had just gotten home from kindergarten and I'd put my skates on to go out to run my laps, to do my training. And while I don't remember everything of the incident, I have a clear memory in my mind of my right skate hitting a pebble and stopping me cold. I went flying through the air, kind of catapulting. I don't remember hitting the ground, but I absolutely do remember holding my arm, skating home, knocking on the door and asking my mom if she could straighten it out so I could keep training. I was in a cast for a couple months after that, and the entire time watching roller derby during that time frame, all I could think about was getting back on my wheels and getting back out there to practice. So the very day that I got my cast off, the first thing that I asked was that my parents help me put my skates on. Well, that's when it happened. That was the moment when my poor dreams were dashed. My 5-year-old dreams when my parents said that they'd hung up my skates for good. Now, when you lose your dream at the age of 5, it can kind of send you afloat. So I kind of drifted through elementary school and junior high and high school. And it wasn't until I took my first communication class in college that I found my replacement obsession. Today, I am passionate about all things communication: speaking, writing, visual design. I have a graduate degree in Information and Communication Studies. I have worked in public relations, special events, operational communications. I have dabbled in advertising and social media marketing. I have taught public speaking at the university level. And I work as a creative strategist by trade. And what that means is that I have made a career of helping executives and organizations to align and elevate their people, their processes, and their programs so that they can kick ass. It's looked different depending on who I've been working with. It could be an entrepreneurial CEO who's having trouble getting his team to fully embrace their vision, or it could be an organization that's kind of old and gotten stuck and stayed in their ways and is looking for creative solutions to move forward. Or in the case of my current position, when I work for How to Manage a Small Law Firm as a fractional CEO, and I help advise small law firm owners and solo practitioner lawyers how they can maximize their profits and exponentially grow their businesses. Now, I've been active with NAWMBA for a little bit over a year with NAWMBASeattle. And so when they asked me if I would be interested in sharing my thoughts on how communication could help us to navigate these uncertain times, I of course said, yes, I'm all in. And that's what we're going to do today. So let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about the most effective communication strategies for working in the virtual workplace. You might want to grab your hip waders because I might go in a little bit deep. We're going to get in the weeds a bit and provide some specific tactics for powering up our communication. Why? Because in these uncertain times, we are stressed and stretched. We don't have time to give the same directions over and over again or the mental energy to keep up with that. There's not enough money or emotional currency to waste cleaning up messes that come from miscommunication. We frankly do not have the wiggle room for ourselves or our staffs to be functioning at anything less than our optional levels. We're experiencing a time when change is constant. We're distributed from our offices. We are remote from our colleagues. And the only thing holding the wheels on this entire machine is our communication. That's why communication is the top skill required for success in the virtual workplace. Everything comes down to our words. Now more than ever, the words that we use matter. And when we communicate effectively, when we communicate from the positive for good, there will be a multiplier effect. I call this communicating from the positive. It's a model of communication that I've developed over 20 years working with elite athletes and high performers in the business arena. And today I'm going to share with you some of the parts of the model that I've developed. Communicating from the positive is all about communicating clearly, with impact, often, and carefully. The first step to communicate effectively in a remote environment is to communicate carefully. And how do we do that? One of the things that's really important is that we start to lose the jargon and our highfalutin vocabulary. We are in an area where there is a lot of people working in the technical industry, and I know that you have all kinds of acronyms and anecdotes and phrases and slogans and phraseology that you use that is special and unique to your area of business. But right now when we're working remote, it's a really good idea to stop leaning so hard on the jargon and to speak a little bit more specifically. We also have a tendency to want to use highfalutin vocabulary. We somehow think that if we use really high words that have very deep meanings, that are very special words, you know, the one that you get on the word a day calendar, that somehow gives the impression that we're really knowledgeable. But in fact, it is the people that are able to take the highly complex idea and break it down in a way that's understandable to a 4-year-old. They're the people that really have the highest understanding. And that never became more clear to me, the rub between how do I choose how high my vocabulary should go, when I should use the jargon, when I need to speak differently in a way that's more direct than when I was in grad school. On my very first day of my very first class of grad school, I walked into a classroom unlike anything I'd ever seen before. First of all, there was nobody in the room. It was completely empty. There was a conference table in the middle of the room with some chairs around it. There was a couple stacks of paper on top, and there was a whiteboard with some directions written on it. On the board, the directions say, read the research articles and answer this question. Turn your paper in by the end of the week. Here's the question. Does the epistemology recapitulate the ontology? Okay, so other than the philosophers in this room, I am pretty sure that you might be feeling exactly how I did in that moment when I saw that sentence. Now, I knew half of the words, does, the, and the, but the rest of it, I was completely clueless. So I grabbed my papers and my pride and I ran out the door. I made it home before I burst into tears, and then eventually realized that if I was going to give this grad thing a whack, I was going to have to figure this stuff out. So I put on my big girl pants and I went to work. I wrote a paper. I did not have high hopes when I turned it in. And so when Dr. Rosillo called me into the office after he received my paper, because he wanted to hand it back to me and give me my grade, I was pretty much like the girls on The Bachelorette that are packing up their stuff in their suitcase before they go to have their date because they know it's probably going to be the last one. That was me. So I go to this meeting, and you can imagine how surprised I was when he handed me back my paper and he gave me an A. The thing that was really more surprising to me was that he told me that I wasn't going to be successful in grad school until I could learn to communicate clearly. This from the man who wrote the question, does the epistemology recapitulate the ontology? Do you know what I titled my paper? Is theory the same as fact? And okay, I know some of you are rolling in your seats and the hair on the back of your neck just went up because I kind of butchered the meaning to some extent or another. But the point being, my title was reachable and understandable to more people. His title was only good in a very specific lane where it was required to have that kind of specificity in the words that he was using. Now, this opened up my eyes to this concept of what is the best way to communicate, certainly in writing, but also in all areas of communication. That started my study that's how I started to develop the model of positive communication. Now, Dr. Rosillo and I, we banged heads on this throughout my time in grad school. In fact, he was the major professor for me on my master's thesis. And when we were coming around to a title, this is what he suggested: a theoretical framework of person perception and individualized impression formation of textile chromature. What I'd like you to do is just take a quick second and see how you might retitle that. What do you think my thesis was on? What would the title be? A theoretical framework of person perception and individualized impression formation of textile chromature. Not quite sure? I don't blame you. This is what I titled it: Clothing Color and First Impressions. The first step for any communication, to be clear, is that we lose the jargon, we lose the highfalutin vocabulary, and we say what we mean in a way that's reachable and understandable by everyone who's going to receive our message. The second step that I want to talk about speaking clearly is a habit that we have of telling people what not to do in order to get them to do something else. For instance, my kids are running like banshees through the house, and I tell them, don't run. And then what do? Well, now they got to figure it out. What do I mean, don't run? Can I hop? So they hop. Can I skip? So they skip. Can I jump? So they jump. When what I want them to do is walk. And had I just said walk, they would know exactly what they were supposed to do. But because I focused on what not to do, I put all the responsibility on them to understand what they were to do, and that just creates misunderstanding or an opportunity for them to push mom's buttons, which I'm sure is part of what was going on as well. So what we need to do is we want to say what people should do rather than what we don't want them to do, so that we don't leave the responsibility on them to figure things out. Here's what it feels like as a person receiving directions when they're stated in a way that tells you only what not to do. So grab a pen and a paper, and you'll see 4 shapes on your screen right now: an oval, a rhomboid, a long rectangle, and a cross. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go ahead and right now start following the directions, and I'd like you to design and draw the model according to the directions. For those of you who are listening, I'm going to go ahead and read those to you now. Do not draw the rectangle at the top. Do not draw the rectangle horizontally. Do not draw the oval horizontally. And do not draw the oval vertically. Do not draw the rectangle so that, do not let the oval touch the rectangle. Do not draw the oval by itself. Do not let the cross touch anything else. Do not let the cross be on the left-hand side. Do not let the long side of the rhomboid touch the long side of the rectangle. Excuse me for looking away at my notes. And do not draw the rhomboid separate from the rectangle. What? Okay, let's try it a different way. Here's the directions telling you what I want you to do. I'm thinking you probably didn't get too far, and that's okay. This time, let's see if we have more success. Please draw the rectangle at the bottom, and draw the rectangle so it's running horizontally. Draw the rhomboid with the point so that it's touching in the very middle of the top line of the horizontal rectangle. Draw the oval diagonally left to right through the middle of the rhomboid. Left to right through the middle of the rhomboid. And then draw the cross to the right, above, and to the right of the rhomboid. Okay, now, as experience has shown me, I've done this tool, used this tool or task in workshops for over 20 years, and I'm going to tell you that I have never not even one time had anybody draw the model that I was trying to get them to draw the first time with those directions of what not to do. But 90, 95%, and sometimes even 100% of the people get it right when I ask them to draw it, giving them directions of what to do. Did you get there this time? Here's the model that we were looking for. So remember to speak clearly, especially in this remote environment. Use your words carefully in a way that they're easy to understand. And when you are giving directions and having conversations, make sure that you phrase what you're saying in the what to do rather than the what not to do perspective. When we work remote, our communication is also somewhat hobbled, as I'm sure you've already experienced. We don't have the same means to share and to decode information. In a live setting, we can read the room. We can read nonverbal cues. We can feel the energy. In remote work, we don't have that same opportunity. Therefore, when we do communicate, a couple things happen. One, every word that we use carries much more weight than it would have otherwise. And when we use our words, they can land with more impact. And in fact, we need them to. We don't have room for a lot of empty words that aren't helping us move our communication forward. So what do? Well, there's really two things that I wanted to focus on in our communication to help us have more impact. One, when I talk about communication and I say that I have a model of positive communication, people are very quick to want to embrace it. And how they do that is that they pepper their speech with lots of goods and greats and amazing and phenomenal, and that was fine. And those platitudes, they do not help us have impact with our communication because, in fact, while they seem positive, they have a negative impact in that they really don't help us to replicate or know what it is that you're telling us in a more specific way that's repeatable. So if you do a project for me and I tell you that that was a good job that you did, you have no idea what part of the project you're supposed to repeat, what made that project good. But if I can tell you instead that you are doing a good job, that I appreciated how you managed the timeline, that your communication was clear and consistent, that I appreciated that you had peppered the entire time frame with group meetings where you tapped into other people's collective intelligence, and by doing so, you did an excellent job on that project. That enables you to take those things that you did well and repeat them. So to have more impact with the words that we use, we want to use descriptive words that are not evaluative, but instead they're descriptive. They help us repeat the thing that we're doing right or avoid the thing that we're doing wrong. Now, in the remote environment, we have to lean on our written communication much more than we ever have before. So I just want to pivot for a minute and talk specifically about written communication and how we can have a little bit more impact with our written communication. Because when we write, to have more impact, we actually need to say less to say more, or write less to mean more. In a virtual remote environment, when we really rely on our written communication, this becomes exceedingly important. So let's go over this for a minute. I mentioned before that I work for How to Manage a Small Law Firm and that we help law firms to maximize their profits. We, in fact, are helping these businesses grow to seven-figure businesses in very, very short periods of time. And what I know from working with lawyers is they are phenomenal writers. Lawyers can write their way out of a box like no one else. And this sample of writing that you see here is from one of the members that I work with that's given me permission to share this. And this bit of writing is actually a marketing bit of writing. This is not technical writing. This is not legal writing. I'm not telling you how to choose that communication that might be regulated or have compliance restrictions. I'm talking to you about the everyday communication that we use to communicate with our staff, our colleagues, our leaders, our vendors. We do it through oral communication, and when we're talking about writing, we're really talking about those dreaded emails. So here's an example of an amazing piece of writing that I really have a ton of respect for. It's very, very well written. And when I received this to review, I was super excited. I just wanted to put on my jammies and grab a blanket and get in a chair and wrap up and grab a bag of M&Ms because I knew it was going to be beautiful writing. And when I looked at it, I thought, oh boy, that's going to take some time, right? That's going to take some time. We're overwhelmed with email communication. So the one thing that we can do, the very, very first thing that we can do to have the most impact is that we can just reduce the overall word count. So that's what I did with this writing, and this is what I've done. First, went through, got rid of extra words, and a great place to start is to eliminate phrases that use the words that and which. If your phrases are using the words that and which, those are great ones to get rid of. Let's take a look at the very first sentence here and see what I did with that. Even before meeting you, we thought you might appreciate knowing more about the firm that you may be entrusting to create this vital planning for your family and your loved ones. Now, what did I do with that? We haven't met you, but we already care. I was able to take that lengthy sentence and boil it down by eliminating words to the core concept. And that enables that thought to come through much more strongly. So take a look at this page also. If we just look at it from a visual standpoint, I know that I'm getting extremely tired from being on Zoom calls all day and doing so much more work that is really straining to my eye and is really about having to work my way through tons and tons of data that comes through visually. I don't know if you're feeling the same way, but I imagine that you are. So taking the time to change my writing so that it is not so overwhelming to the eye is super impactful. So that's the first thing I did. You can see how I wrote on the right. It has a lot more white space. There's a lot fewer words. And I've done a couple other moves on purpose. One, try to write sentences that do not have more than 20 words. That's kind of the end of the line. After we hit 20-word sentences, we start to kind of lose the thread a little bit. They're harder to read. In a given sentence, try to limit yourself. In a given paragraph, try to limit yourself to no more than 5 sentences so it's not so overwhelming. As you can see here, using lists or bullets can really help to make it easier to read and to make your communication have more impact. And then you can try a technique that I've done here, which is called by using bolding to draw the reader's eye down the page. So if I was only to read this document by jumping from bold point to bold point, what would I see? We haven't met you, but we already care. The firm you can entrust. Give time and attention, personal and down to earth. We are responsive. We are thorough. We think beyond the will. We provide a record, we maintain copies, we help beneficiaries. We want to be your lawyer. We look forward to serving you. See how I can tell a story through bolding and my eye can jump through the page? Now, the other side is beautiful writing, and the communication is very clear when I have the time to read into it. But if I want to communicate with impact in a way that really has a lot of pop right from the start, I want to reduce my overall word count. I want to limit the number of words I use in each sentence. I want to reduce the number of sentences I use in each paragraph. I want to lean on lists and bullets, and I want to highlight the story in bold down the page so that people can look at it and your communication would have impact at a glance. When we move to the remote environment, the way that we communicated needed to change in terms of its cadence as well. When we're working remote, it is more important than ever to communicate often. We need to say it. We need to say it often. We need to say it early, and we need to say it regularly. Because more than ever, if we don't communicate something, it effectively doesn't exist. This is true in the physical workplace as well. If I have a vision for something that I don't share with you, but I give you a project to manage, it's not likely that you're going to be able to hit my vision because it effectively doesn't exist. I haven't shared it with you. When we're in this remote environment, that becomes more and more true. Additionally, because we're in these uncertain times, it requires a certain style of communication. In the communication world, we would call it crisis communication. The concept is that we want to get ahead of the story. We want to get ahead of the story. And here's what I mean by that. If I'm working at home as an employee, one of the things that I'm most afraid of, and I'm imagining that you guys are all going through this in one way or another, is that you're going to be left behind. That you've been working so hard and you were so promotable and you've been working towards this next goal and achievement for yourself and moving your career ahead. And now you're alone and by yourself and nobody knows what you're doing. And beyond that, you're not even sure if you even get a glimpse of the news, that your business is going to stay in business. So for every minute, second, minute, hour, multiple hours that pass by as an employee, my stress has a tendency to rise to the point that I can get triggered and be in a pretty anxious state. And I know that all of us have gone through this at one point or another during this time that we've been remote. So how do I counter that? I counter that by getting my communication in front of the story. Communicate before the anxiety can come in. So what I advise my members, the people that I work with, is that they establish a communication calendar or a communication schedule. This is just a sample that I came up with. And when I developed it, what I was trying to do is replicate the communication that happens regularly in the physical office. For instance, my day in a physical office, for this example, starts at 8 a.m. and is done at 6 p.m. And when I walk in the door on the very first moment, the very first thing that I do, I say hi to people. There's a morning communication where I acknowledge people, hi, 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 as I grab my coffee and take it to my desk, right? So when I'm remote, I can replicate that same exact feeling of being there by reaching out and just doing a short communication. Now, where I work at How to Manage a Small Law Firm, we use a tool called Voxer. Maybe you use Slack. You can also do this by email. I would suggest that it be an audio message if at all possible. And just send that message to everybody on your team saying, good morning, I'm back at work today, hope you have a great one. If you're a leader, it's a great way to let people know that it's time to start their day. And if you're that person that's worrying that they're being overlooked, you're getting yourself top of mind right at the beginning of the day. Your employer or your manager or boss knows that you are serious and you have gotten to work. A couple hours later, and I timed this around every communication coming in about 2-hour breaks, remembering that I'm trying to get ahead of that story of possible stress or concern, or reduce any anxiety people may have over problems they're encountering in their work. So this schedule that I've created, again, is every 2 hours. So then about 10 o'clock, I do a check-in. Now, if I'm a leader, this is a mandatory meeting that I have. I conduct this meeting by Zoom. It is every day at the same time. It is only 10 or 15 minutes. Some of you may be familiar with it, called a scrum. This is not a status meeting. This is not where I tell you how many things I've completed. We have tools for that, right? We have project management tools, we have software, we have ways that we can see where we are in a project. This is where I just have a moment of accountability and I share out how it is that I'm going to achieve my day. And if I need any help or support from anybody, I would share it there as well. So today I've got over 400 emails from this long holiday weekend we just returned from. So most of my day is going to be spent doing email. And so I'm available all day long if you need me for anything. Or, hey, I need to get this project done by the end of the day, and I'm still waiting for this one element that's supposed to come from you. If you could forward that to me by noon, that would be great. Quick, to the point, 10 or 15 minutes, in and out, that's the meeting. Now, if your leader is not having one of those meetings, well, I would encourage you to ask for it. But even if you don't feel comfortable or it's not something that they're willing to take on, you can reach out at 10 o'clock and let your boss know what it is you're going to be doing for the day and how it is that you're going to need their support or the support of other people on the team. A couple hours later, we round the clock, we come into lunchtime. This is typically a social time if we were in the physical office. So I do some sort of a social communication at this time. It could be that I send a joke or a meme, or I share something that happened in my life that's personal, but it's all social communication. And what channel I use for this can depend on the team. I like to use a text because in my mind, I see people eating their lunch, so their hands are busy, and I just want something that's going to kind of pop up and they can just see it. Not something that's going to add to their email at this point, not something that they have to pick up and push buttons to listen to. After lunch, we go back to work, and we all know what happens around 2 or 3 o'clock. We kind of hit those midday doldrums. So this is a time that's another great time to reach out, maybe with an audio message, and just let people know, hey, we've got this. And how we can let them know is by sharing some celebrations. So anything that we're doing well as a team, or anyone who has done something for you that you can recognize, just go ahead around 2 o'clock and just send out some sort of audio message saying, hey, thanks so much to Sue. She was pivotal in my morning this morning. She got me that document that I needed. I've been able to complete my project. Yay, team. We are that much closer to finishing up this program. After we do that, a couple hours later, because remember I'm looking at about an every 2-hour cadence of my communication, that's when I do a goals update. And I have the tendency to do that by email. Now, as a leader, I'm doing that because as people are rounding to the end of the day, I want them to continue pushing towards the thing that we're trying to achieve. So if I am to send an email out and do a reminder of where we are against our goals, it could be a goal for the day, it could be a quarterly goal, it could be a weekly goal, it could be an annual goal. But if I do some sort of an update or reminder toward our goals, that's going to remind people to kind of kick it into overdrive in those last couple hours of work. And then for those of us that are the high achievers working at home, we probably have the problem that our work rolls into our regular life more than it ever has before, and our quality of life goes down. And if we're leaders, it's our responsibility to make sure that our employees are really just working the hours that they should work and that they're not overworking themselves, because when they become burnt out, it's not going to help their health or our organization. So a final email around the end of the day that lets everybody know we have reached the end of our day is the last thing that I suggest. If you're a leader, you might reach out and ask people to remember to turn in their time log for the day, or the performance tracker that needs updated, or in the case of how to manage a small law firm where we're working with lawyers, we ask people to turn in their billable hours. If you're an employee, this is a great time for you to send a proactive email letting your supervisor, manager, or leader know what you've completed for the day. That's how we're going to stay in front of the communication. We're going to stay top of mind with the people who need to know that we're doing our job, and we're going to stay in touch with the people who may be feeling a little anxious and a little adrift and a little isolated. The next thing we need to concentrate on is the power of our words. We have to be very careful how we communicate. Now more than ever, our words have power and significance. They impact the way that we think, they impact the way that we feel emotionally, and our words actually have a neurophysiological impact as well. What I mean by that is that when we're little, how we learn to think, how we develop complex cognition is through our words. And I know that you're all probably aware that what we think, in fact, impacts how we feel. But have you thought about the fact that what we think is really made up of a series of words or labels of images? And how we got there, how we developed the ability to think at all, and what we think about things is through our words and labels. So I'm a child and I have a critter in my house and it has 4 legs, 2 ears, and a tail, and it's fluffy. And my mom points at it and calls it a dog. So when I see that critter with the 4 legs, fluffy, 2 ears, and a tail, I call it dog. Then I go to my Grammy's house. My Grammy has a critter that's also fluffy. It has 4 legs, 2 ears, and a tail, and I point at it and say dog, and she says, no, that's a cat. In that moment, I not only learn something about fuzzy critters with 4 legs, 2 ears, and a tail. There's different types of them. They can be dog or cat. But I also have a richer understanding of what a dog is in comparison to a cat when I experience the behavioral differences of those two things. So our words have a real and measurable way of affecting how it is that we think about things. So when we use our words, we need to use them with care. Additionally, our words are responsible for how we feel about things. In fact, research shows that about 40% of the happiness that we feel comes from the words that we use. That's right, the words that we use affect how we feel. And when we use words in a negative way, it has such a strong impact that it in fact takes 4 positive statements to undo a negative statement. That's how much impact that our bias towards negativity, that's how strong that is. Finally, our words have neurophysiological impact. And if we were doing this as a live workshop, as I often do, this is the point where I would take out my heart rate monitor and I would show it to you on my wrist. And you would see that when I'm presenting, my heart rate is somewhere around 70, 75 beats per minute. And then I do an exercise where I do some external self-talk and I really say some nasty things about myself. I will say that I'm ugly and I'm stupid, I'm old, I'm subpar, I'm not smart enough for this, I don't belong in front of these people, whatever it is, negative. And you will see, you will witness that my heart rate monitor will spike. My heart rate will quickly go from 75 to 85 to 92 to 100, even as high as 115 beats per minute, just from listening to myself say negative words about myself. So don't doubt for a minute that your words have power. Beyond that, people have trouble separating judgments about their behavior from judgments about themselves. So if I'm coaching soccer and I say to you, great kick, you hear, I'm great. And if I was to give my athlete the feedback, that shot sucked, you know what they hear? They hear that they suck. People have difficulty separating descriptions of their behavior, given in words, from descriptions or judgments about themselves. So it's super important that we use our words differently and carefully. So how do we have the tendency to use our words? Well, really, we use our words out of habit. They're not always very well thought out. We just kind of speak in a cadence and a way using similar words to what we always use. And in doing so, we have the tendency to lead to the negative because of that negativity bias that I know that you're aware of from back in the day when we needed to look out for danger at every turn. So we have the tendency to speak highlighting danger by telling people what not to do instead of what to do. We covered that a little bit before. The other thing that we do is we are not descriptive enough in our words. So here's what I've done. I have put some statements out that are pretty typical that we all use all the time. They're kind of, the phrases, colloquialisms almost, ways that we combine words consistently across our culture to describe certain things. And what we do is state them in this kind of accidentally disempowering way rather than being descriptive and empowering. So let me just read through those. I can't afford it. Don't forget. I'm no good at that. Have to. I'm too busy. I'm unlucky. Argumentative. I can't wait. How is it that you can restate these common statements in a way that is positive and has a positive outcome on the people that you're communicating with and with yourself, cognitively, affectively, and neurophysiologically? Let's see if we can take these statements and do that. So our first statement says, I can't afford it. How can I reframe that? How can I describe or communicate the exact same thing in a different way that will have a more positive impact? What if I was to say my money goes to other things? Instead of telling myself I can't afford it, I'm recognizing my responsibility in managing my money and putting my money towards other things. Instead of saying, don't forget, we can say, please remember. I'm no good at that can become, I have places to grow, or I can do better. I have to do something. Well, just say that you want to. Change from a have to a want. I'm too busy. I can find time for that. I can make time for that. I am unlucky can become something like I deserve better. Do you have a person who drives you crazy at work? They argue with everything you say and you label them as argumentative? Did you know that you could change the label and change how you perceive that person? Because an argumentative person might also be able to be seen as an innovative thinker, right? The reason they disagree with everything is they're always finding a creative way to think differently about things. If I can take my relationship with a person that I see as argumentative, and I can instead frame it by the label that they're an innovative thinker, it's so much easier to get along. And it sends such a better energy back between the two of you when I communicate that carefully. And finally, I can't wait can become, I am looking forward to. So words, they have power. They can inform our mind, knowledge, caress and comfort our feelings, hug, excite and thrill our spirit, ice cream, or warm and kindle the flame of our hearts, love. But they can also slap us in our face, stupid, punch us in the stomach, cancer, rattle our nerves, perform, kill our desire, ugly, or destroy our self-confidence, can't. That is the power of communication. It's the glue that's holding it all together for us right now. All of us in our suddenly remote workforces are learning how important communication is when we communicate, how much we rely on it, and how important it is for our success. Because when we are able to communicate from the positive, which I'm defining as communicating clearly, with impact, carefully, and often, we can harness the power of our words and make a positive impact on our own thoughts, feelings, and actions, and the thoughts, feelings, and actions of those around us. So, I hope I have inspired you to think a little bit more about the words that you use. If you would like to connect, I would absolutely love to connect to you if you want to talk about the things that inspired you in this presentation, if you want to work on honing your communication skills more, or if you have a love of roller derby, please reach out because I would absolutely love to connect with you. And if you are the owner of a small law firm or a solo practitioner lawyer and you're interested in learning how to manage a small law firm works, don't hesitate to email me at Tami, T-A-M-I-L, at howtomanage.com, and we can show you the secret sauce for building a 7-figure firm. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you go out and use those words for good. Thank you.